Hello and welcome. Okay. Just checking everything here. All right. I've got two things going here at once. I've got my Samsung like little tablet thing and my phone here today. So just checking some stuff on both. But welcome to those that are joining. I know this usually takes a few minutes for people to start actually dropping in. And for those of you that are watching the replay, I would say just fast forward it to probably about 3 to 5 minutes in. That's usually around when we begin. So again, if you're on the replay, you can fast forward while I'm just waiting for people to drop in and connect. And then I'm going to start speaking into what our subject matter for today is. And while I'm waiting for people to drop in, I've got to check something really quickly. Our conversation today is going to be on communication and what clear communication is, how to recognize, what pattern recognition is in terms of communication, what authentic communication is versus inauthentic communication, and how trauma or perceived trauma actually affects communication. Now, in terms of the chat, I have the chat on slow mode. I have it purposefully set that way. And once this fully connects with everyone, I will probably, hello and welcome. I will probably set the chat up specifically for subscribers simply because the chat seems to get a little bit chaotic sometimes with people dropping in and just kind of throwing a bunch of stuff out there. So just giving everyone an opportunity to tune in, and then we're going to go into speaking around, what actual clear communication is. And what I would invite you to do if you're choosing to be here is to be attentive to give yourself permission to tune into what's being shared. One thing that we are so used to as a society is not paying attention, right? We're seeking attention so desperately that we don't actually give our attention fully and clearly. It's very easy to jump from one thing to the next and just consistently jump around and not remain committed. And this is what when we talk about authentic communication versus inauthentic communication, why it's so important to recognize how everyone, until they know better, until they know different, everyone is communicating inauthentically because they simply don't have an awareness of what they're saying. They don't have an awareness of why they're saying it. There's a lot of bubble gum, if you will. There's a lot of imaginative bubble gum that's just consistently stuck to the way people speak. And I have a mentorship group or a free space. It's a self-mastery space, self-development space. And I have a free version and I have a paid version of that space. Plus I also mentorship. And one of the things that we're exchanging around right now is this topic. And I specifically set up some new things around the group where I have these instructions laid out very clearly They're very basic instructions, like going into a calendar invite in your email and clicking yes. Something very simple. It seems very nonchalant. It seems very innocuous, but this was something that was invited for everyone that's a part of the paid space. Just very simple instructions. There was only one person that actually followed the instructions correctly and paid attention. I say that because this is how we go through our day-to-day lives. We go through our day-to-day lives not paying attention. And therefore, when we actually sit down to have a conversation with someone, we actually sit down to have an exchange with someone, we're not communicating from attentive awareness. We're communicating from inauthentic, unconscious, chaotic awareness, which means our awareness is all over the place. And it's also why we get bored easy. It's why we're jumping around. It's why we don't remain committed to one thing. It's why that a lot of society right now has a difficult time showing up to a job and actually remaining consistent and committed to a job where they are actually getting paid money, because the codependency to needing to fill this void of attention is like an addiction. And of course, this is where phones and technology have played a large role in consistently allowing bypassing to take place. It reminds me of like spiritual communities that I was a part of. There's a lot of spiritual anatomy, but there's not real depth. So I want you to think about the conversations that you have with people. Maybe conversations with a partner, conversations with a friend, conversations with a family member. How much depth is actually existing in that conversation? Is there real authentic depth that's taking place, or is it just passing of information and basically just sitting there and talking about what's happening? Are you actually exchanging from a heart-led space? And this might be important to some, it might not be important to some. But for me, when you start recognizing your own patterns, it's impossible to have a conversation that's anything but authentic. And when we look at, I'm gonna share something one of my mentors shared with me when it comes to communication. And they use the analogy of, let's say that I have an apple farm, and as I'm going out to my apple farm and I'm going to pick apples, I start picking the apples from all the trees in the front row, and every single apple on that tree is rotten. So I take the apples, I take them inside, I get a toothbrush, and I start cleaning the outside of the apples with a toothbrush and, let's say, Windex. Right, I'm polishing up the apples. And so after I polish up the apples and they look really good and they look really clean, I take a bite of the apple, assuming that just because the outside is polished, the inside's going to taste better. You can't clean and polish a rotten apple and expect it to taste better. You can't polish a turd and expect it to be not a turd, okay? You can sound really, really convincing. This is, again, what happened in that spiritual anatomy and a lot of spiritual groups that I've been a part of, especially even those that are committed to self-development and self-help. The wording sounds really good, but what's underneath that is a lot of unresolved and unaware, chaotic, inattentive behaviors. Those behaviors are not actually aware of themselves. They're not attentive to their own needs because they don't even know what those needs are. And so when a person communicates, just because it sounds good doesn't mean it is good. And this is where a lot of society gets the whole conversation and the whole, let's say, the dialogue around support, friendship, help. It's highly convoluted and confused. Most people think support sounds really nice. They think it sounds like a really, really calm, soothing, toning voice. But that's not true. True support is someone that's willing to call you on your bullshit. My mentors they call all of us on our bullshit. I call those that I mentor on their bullshit. That's real love and support. And I don't want someone that's going to stroke my ego and make me feel like I'm doing a good job. I want to recognize what what the job actually is that I am doing. How am I actually applying myself? Am I applying myself in my fullest potential? Or am I bypassing my fullest potential, hoping that somebody else is going to show up and fulfill it for me? And this also happens a lot of self-help spaces. So I wish I could share my screen here, and I really need to start going live on Zoom so I can do a screen share, because I don't think I have that option here. But there's a chart that I've got a few charts that give you that list out what authentic versus inauthentic communication looks like. And everyone, until they know better, is on the inauthentic side of communication, where they're defensive or they're attacking, where they're manipulating, where they're attempting to protect themselves. And a lot of these traits, you guys, we don't even realize that we're doing it. I have exchanges with those in my self-help space or my self-development, self-mastery space. And as we're exchanging, this came up the other day, and I had a sister that was sharing with me around some choices she was making, and her choice to start approaching, reconnecting with people, integrating into new communities and new connections. And as she was speaking about it, what I reflected back to her was the defensiveness that was there in her words and in her voice. Now, of course, when you're not aware of where you're coming from, you won't hear the defensiveness. You won't hear the emotional manipulation. But if you're exchanging with someone that recognizes patterns, they're going to easily pick up on where you're actually coming from. And to me, I want people to have an awareness of that within themselves. You know, it's really easy to go into a conversation and bypass everything about yourself and everything about the other person. But that doesn't create a space of value between you and that person, especially in relationships. And this is why a lot of relationships don't last. And this is why a lot of marriages don't last. Because one party or the other is expecting something from the other person. There's one person that's highly defensive, highly protective. They have this sense of needing to stand up for their rights and needing to defend their stance and needing to prove why they feel and think the way that they do. That's a form of action. That's emotional manipulation instead of emotional validation. It is someone that's seeking emotional validation. Emotions are actually not validated through another person. Your emotions are validated through you, by your willingness to be with and face your emotions so that you understand what you're really feeling. So if you give yourself an opportunity to really access this in a way that is, one second. There, I'll fix that. If you give yourself an opportunity to actually delve into this, and again, this is not, I recognize this type of subject matter is not, it's not going to land with just the regular passerby. This is going to be for those that are really, really, committed to going into a space of deeper self-awareness and deeper recognition of their patterns and their habits and their behaviors. And so, I get it. Like 95% of people passing through are not going to be interested in this, and that's fine. But for that 1-2% that passes through, that's in a place where they really want to start living in a way where their communication is valued because they understand the value of their communication, right? This is for you. And, as I'm exploring this alongside others, right? Because I lead a space and I'm a part of a group space, a mentorship space, that this is the subject matter, that and money is what's coming up right now, plus the completion of relationships with our parents. And this is also something, like I said, I'm providing as well. And one of the biggest things that I recognized is that because we're all walking around without the completion of the relationship with our parents, we don't realize how much of that is leaking into our relationships with others. Excuse me. So people are walking around in a marriage and they still have an unresolved relationship with their father or an unresolved relationship with their mother, and they're carrying those behavioral contexts onto their partner. They're projecting them. a client I was just with 2 days ago. And as we were going through the process of resolving some of the memories and completing some of those moments that have been bypassed through feeling, the biggest thing that I asked her, I said, what is it that you're holding on to right now, that you're still holding on to? And she said, feeling like I need to be chosen. I really want a man. I feel like I'm never going to meet someone that chooses me for me. There's a fear that she's going to end up going the rest of her life and being single, or she's not going to have a life partner, right? She's had partners, but like not a life partner. And I asked her why what was coming up around that. And as you start to go into the memories, there's all these moments throughout her life where there's a perception that she was not chosen. Maybe it was in kindergarten where the boy she liked chose someone else and wanted to play with him, or wanted to give this other girl the toys. Or maybe at some point in a friendship, that friend chose to hang out with someone besides her. There's all these different memories that are surfacing. But where it originated was in her childhood with her parents. And when she made that connection, and this is what's really interesting, you guys, the stories that we're standing behind are not the full truth. This is why throughout our lives, we carry emotional manipulation towards others. We manipulate with our words because we haven't really been with what we really feel and how we feel and why we choose to feel that way and why we perceive that way. Why did we assign meaning in that way? What was the actual pattern that was taking place when I started to tell this story in my head? So in that moment where she felt like she wasn't chosen, it came back to the moment her sister was born and her parents were giving her sister attention. And she was telling me, when she was reliving this memory, she was saying that her parents never gave her attention. They never gave her attention. The attention always went to her sister. And I asked her, I said, well, oh, so you literally never got attention. So your parents, they never slept, they never ate, they never showered, they never went to the bathroom. They were literally always giving your sister attention, and you never got attention. Is that true? And she said, well, no, but, and I said, no buts. No, is that true? And she said, no, that's not true. And I said, okay, so you did get attention. And she said, well, yeah, but, and I said, no buts. You got attention, didn't you? That's interrupting the pattern. That's interrupting the loop. And she said, well, yeah, I did. I got attention. And she was really uncomfortable because, you guys, when you have to face that story and you have to start feeling what you have connected to the story, it's going to be uncomfortable. She didn't want to like reclaim this bad guy persona that she had projected onto her parents and onto her sister, because that means I got to take responsibility for the truth. And the truth is that I was given attention. I was chosen. I just wasn't chosen in the way that I wanted to be at the exact moment that I wanted to be chosen, for the reasons why I decided I needed to be chosen. And that moment right there begins to build the foundation for how every relationship she's ever had followed. And then she dropped in many messages after the session. There was a lot more that came through, but she dropped in many messages following that over the course of the last day or so. And she's been making more and more connections. I realized that this is in relation to this, and this is in relation to this. And I can see how this last relationship, why there was so much attachment, and why I was needing that person so bad, why I was needing them to choose me. And I'm seeing where all the stories are playing out. I cannot overstate how powerful recognizing what stories you're carrying are, what the meaning is you've assigned, and the truth of how those actually live through you. And we are so used to speaking through unconscious attention that we don't realize the depth of how much we've actually chosen to believe our own stories. I had another thing come through, another client, where she was speaking about, she's worked with me before. We took a little bit of a break, and now she's working with me again. And during that break, what was happening in the transition is my prices were changing, my offerings were changing, and she didn't feel like in that shift that there was a place for her to say yes. It was her choice. She just didn't say yes. She didn't recommit. In her mind, because of all the abandonment wounding, she chose to believe the story that she was never chosen and that I kicked her from the group. But I didn't. I didn't. And this is something I'm sure she'll come on here and comment on and say, yeah, you're right. It was an agreement. I let her know what everything was, what it was going to look like, how things were changing, send everything over to her, let her know what her options were, and she didn't choose any of those options, which of course now I've added more stuff onto that, and now she has chosen another option. But when she was expressing to me what she was moving through, when I sent out the assignment for the group, the reflection back was all the fears and all the feelings of needing to perform that were coming up in connection with the story in her mind that she was still saying that she was afraid if she didn't get it right, she'd be kicked from the group again. I don't even think she realized she said that. When I reflected it back to her, I said, this is very interesting, because we've had this exchange a few times around that subject matter, but she's still carrying the story. Even though that story isn't true, she's still speaking about it as if it is. So we walk around all day and we are only aware of about 85%. I'm sorry, no, there's about 85% that we're not aware of that we carry in our subconscious. So of all the stories that you do speak about and share, even those are coming from an unconscious awareness, even though you're saying them. Think about how much is in the background, how much noise is controlling what you say, when you say it, and how you say it. And how many times have you chosen not to speak up because you're afraid of repercussion? Because you're afraid that something bad will happen, right? You're afraid that if I don't get this right, this person is not going to like me. They're not going to want to talk to me anymore because I don't say the right things, or they're going to think something bad about me, right? So I share all this with you because it's not only important, it's an opportunity to realize just how we operate on a daily basis in one of the most common natural ways, and that's communication. And I cannot tell you how much I've heard from people throughout this journey. And actually, most commonly, when I started connecting to spiritual communities, how many people say, I don't have the words. That's why light language became a big thing. I mean, I used to speak light language and express light language and tones and everything else. It's here on my page. And you guys can see that. The reason I don't anymore is because I realized how much of me was trying to escape through this bypassing of something called light language, because it felt like people received it easier because and actually was said, it bypasses the mind. Now I realize what a big deal that is. You don't want to bypass the mind. Words, your voice. This is the reason why we have a voice. This is the reason why we have language. It is our form of communication. It is our form of creation. And because we don't actually think thoughts just come through our field and we choose which ones we want to work with, we can literally use any word. We have access to anything that we want if we accept that. If we stop accepting that story that we lack words, that we don't know what to say, that we can't access something, because that's just a lie. It's a lie. And this whole light language, spiritual bypassing thing, it's fun, but it is what it is, right? Sounds are only like, I'm going to just kind of break this down for a second. Tones, light language, those sounds, they carry the same thing that you do anytime you're speaking to someone in your native language. So if you're speaking in your native language, and in that native language, you have a belief that thinks that I have difficulty expressing myself, it doesn't get better just because you're speaking light language. That belief is passing through your voice. Your voice is carried from your nervous system. Your nervous system is a byproduct of every belief, every meaning assignment, anything and everything that has imprinted in you throughout your lifetime and multiple lifetimes on an emotional, mental perception level. And so your nervous system is speaking from your beliefs. irregardless of whatever you think is going to come through that light language or that tone or whatever, you can think whatever you want to think about that, but that doesn't make it true. Just like that story that the beautiful sister shared as she was reviewing her memories, that said her parents never gave her attention. Just because she thought that that's what happened, just because that's a story she was telling, doesn't mean that that was true. That wasn't really what happened. That's not the facts. And as my mentors say, what's the facts? What happened? Like, boy see dog carry stick. That's how you communicate. That's how you express. Hello and welcome. And when you communicate from facts, you're able to recognize your own stories easier if you're willing. Again, willingness is a very, very important factor here. If you're willing to acknowledge your own bullshit, and this means you acknowledge the responsibility of the stories that you're carrying. So it's so easy to get caught up in the whole spiritual, what I call the spiritual anatomy, which is how everyone wants to approach the bypassing through imaginative effort, where we go into playing in the realm of the archetypes, the light language, the angels, the demons, all these things. It doesn't mean that they can't carry weight. It just means the only weight that they can carry is your belief of them, because that's all that exists anyways. So if you come into a community and everyone's sharing something like light language or tones, your voice doesn't just somehow carry something different just because you're under the guise of light language or tones. Your tone is your tone. Your tone is your beliefs. Your tone is your meaning assignment. So if I am walking around every single day and I literally believe that I have difficulty communicating, I believe that I still harbor resentment for my parents, I still hold hate in my heart for an ex-boyfriend or an ex-girlfriend, I'm still living from moments of emotional intensity where I believe something bad happened to me, as I'm expressing that light language or that whatever it is, all of that's still coming through. It doesn't go anywhere just because I am expressing something spiritual. And this is where a lot of that gets really muddled. And of course, I've also been a part of self-help, self-development communities, or doing the plant medicine ceremonies. I've practiced supposed somatics and embodiment, where the only thing that took place was like you're moving your body, and there was recognition of self-awareness, but the main driving factor was that you needed to move your body. And one thing I've noticed, these are just like slight differentiations, and it carries over into communication and so forth. How easy these modalities are still being accessed from escapism and bypassing. One thing I've learned through practicing different layers and levels of somatics and where I'm at now, and all the mentors I've learned, I've practiced with yogis, I've practiced with monk masters. I mean, I've gone through quite a few different levels and layers of mentorship throughout these last almost, 6-7 years. And the one thing I've come to realize is that when my body is ready and able to release somatically, when my nervous system is in a space of parasympathetic relaxation, it's open and available, it feels safe, it feels secure, and I am in a state of open availability through my own willingness to be, I'm willing and able to see myself and understand what's happening, my body moves without me trying to make it move. So if I'm trying to make my body move through somatic dance, I'm literally doing what I think my body needs to do to move. Now, there are pressure point releases. We can do different, opening different meridians and accessing different points in the body to do fascia releases. And that's one thing that does support. That's intentional as well. But there is something about just physically dancing or moving the body that is cathartic, but not necessarily somatic. That's, that's just like if somebody has a big session where they cry a lot, if they're not in the root of awareness that allows them to be willful and willing to release the story, they can cry about the realization all they want. It can be very cathartic. It doesn't mean it completes. And completion happens in a very peaceful way. It's not a big dramatic thing. So what happens is your body moves involuntarily. Your nervous system is opening itself. And so any place where there was resistance or restriction, your body starts moving. A lot of times my body will go into rotation, my neck will turn, it'll open. I'm not even thinking about my body moving. I'm focused on what it is I'm releasing by being aware of it. But my body goes through the motions itself. I don't have to stand up and tell my body to do it by, being in that state. So I feel like there is a difference. I'm not saying that it can't support. I'm not saying that getting up and shaking your body and dancing and moving I'm not saying it's not a good practice. I'm saying it's from where you're approaching it from, just like anything. Okay. Like I said, you can study self-development all day long, but if you don't understand how it's being applied intentionally and purposefully, then you're just retaining information. If you're aware that your body's movements release something somatically, but you have no understanding of what that actually is, you're just following through with the movements, and there's a catharticism there, but not a somatic release. So trauma completes itself, you guys, when we are in complete, attentive, intentional, purposeful awareness. And this is a depth of pattern recognition. So how often do you recognize your patterns? I feel like this, again, I just feel like this is something that's just now really coming into being an interest for people. I don't know how much people actually commit to this, but I can tell you right now, it is one of the most beautiful, transformative, I find it to be fun practices. And it's not just a practice, it's literally a life-changing transformational application. Recognizing your patterns is being the observer of your reality, the creator of your reality, and the clear channel for God's source universe simultaneously. Because when you're the observer and you are recognizing a looped pattern, a looped behavior as it's approaching your awareness, and you're able to observe and capture it, you're able to interrupt the loop, and you're able to redirect that energy into a more stable, suitable, and supportive outcome without fear or worry about what the outcome is. You just know it's being redirected to a more supporting environmental experience. You're the one that's the ultimate driver. You're the one that's the pilot of where you're going, right? You're in the driver's seat. You're standing behind the controls. You're in the control room. You're not running around with the entire room on fire trying to put out thousands of fires simultaneously. Everything just flows right through your awareness. You capture it, you're aware of it, you redirect it, and there's never any impending doom. And I honestly, until I started connecting with as many as I am connecting with right now, I did not realize how many people live in impending doom or are consistently speaking from a space of unconscious awareness. I feel like it's such a big thing that people don't even recognize. And just that, like I said, just the exchanges I have on a daily basis with those that are in my group spaces, those that I mentor, that like one exchange can be broken down into an hour's worth of material to teach. Literally just a 2 to 3 minute exchange can supply a person with hours of learning. That's how much unconscious action comes through that one point of communication. So when people think that there's nothing to be aware of, there's nothing happening, it's because they assume there has to be some big dramatic event that takes place. The truth is, the big dramatic event is already taking place within you. You're just not aware of it. And I had somebody ask me, a sister asked in my group the other day when I was exploring this, And I would like to read something to you guys if you're open to receiving it. I'm going to share with you guys what I shared with my group because it was something I typed out and it's really powerful. When I was sharing, what the sister asked me when I was exchanging around the importance of recognizing and discerning communication. And the communication table, by the way, under inauthentic communication, she was asking me if there was really a difference between things like protecting and controlling or avoiding and defending, because they all seem to run together for her. She's like, for me, she said she was having a conversation with someone, and in that conversation, it was kind of similar to what I was talking into here. And I believe she might have had some things come through when I shared that table with her. And she was asking, she said they all seem to run together to her. There doesn't seem to be a distinction. And even just that statement right there is very important. When there's not a distinction between manipulating and defending or manipulating and protecting, it's because you're running on autopilot. Autopilot is an inattentive awareness. It still hasn't been able to discern the patterns of what that looks like and feels like. So, for instance, if I'm protecting, I'm in a belief system that feels that if I do not stand up and protect myself, no one else will, because I have believed throughout my life that nobody has ever stood up and protected me and taken my side, or, defended me. Protection and defending go in the same, they tie in together. So I try to protect myself by keeping people out here. So I will probably be hyperactive in terms of maybe like sarcasm, or when I speak, I'm going to throw some bullshit at you. Like, I have people that come into this chat all the time and just throw random stuff in the chat. It's like they're trying to put on the attack and project judgment before they even hear anything I say. And that's a protection mechanism. If I can distract you, if I can attack you, then I can protect myself. Then I can automatically be on the defensive. I'm ready for whatever comes because I'm just going to throw everything at you first. And that, of course, it's not true safety. It's chaos. It's chaos. So that also ties into wanting to control the conversation. It's a form of emotional manipulation. So all of them tie in together. But when we're on autopilot, it's like the same brain. We have a brain that can function attentively, but it's so used to running on autopilot. All of these programs, this trauma has been controlling the perception for so long that we believe our own lies. We believe our own stories. We believe that what we believe is the most important thing, and there is nothing that anyone can convince us otherwise. And we see this in the pendulum of like politics, identity recognition, religion. There's a lot of pendulums that are active, that are based in that type of inauthentic and unclear forms of emotional manipulation that happens through a lack of clear communication, where people get really stuck on their beliefs and they're not willing to let go of it. I've had this come up in my own clients when they have a body that is not physically well, and they want to go in practicing and applying many modalities to try to heal their body. But the core source of their disease is their own stories. It's their own belief system. And they're so attached to needing to validate how sick they are. They're attached to the state of victimhood mentality that keeps them stuck there, that they're not willing to accept that they created that. They put themselves in that position. It's your body is a perfect engine. And it runs so smoothly, so harmonically, so harmoniously, but it can only do so when the nervous system can speak clearly. And when you're running around on autopilot, unaware of how you feel, unaware of how you think, again, 85% of what you actually believe is in the background, it's noise. And you're constantly focusing on something, like, even if you're not aware of it, even if it's running in the background, you're still unconsciously attaching to it somewhere out here in a friendship, in a relationship, in maybe a TV show that you watch, in a conversation you're having. You're latching onto it, even if you're not aware that you are. It's coming through you no matter what. So I want to share this with you guys, and I hope that everyone is open to receiving this. This is around attention through intentional awareness versus inattentive chaos through unconscious awareness. This is something I sent my group, and I'm going to share it with you guys. Okay. So this is two very different operating systems that hide inside that sentence. Okay. Same brain, same nervous system, entirely different experience of reality. And as I'm going into this, I'm also going to share what my mentors share with me. When I'm speaking, and I'm always speaking from intentional awareness, they say to me, and I say this to my clients now, what do they see that I don't see? Because a balanced, regulated nervous system sees reality much differently than a dysregulated, chaotic, unattentive, purposefully inattentive perception. We don't realize how much we lack attention until we actually start being asked to pay attention. And then it really starts to get interesting. Okay. So I'm sharing this with you because these are things, this is coming from me seeing things that I didn't used to see and what I invite my clients to see that maybe they're not seeing. Okay. So attention through intentional awareness is when perception becomes deliberate. Your mind is not merely reacting to stimuli, it is selecting what deserves energy. In neuroscience terms, attention acts like a spotlight controlled largely by the prefrontal cortex, which, by the way, the prefrontal cortex starts through traumatic perception. The prefrontal cortex shrinks. So your logic, your ability to plan, to make decisions, to self-regulate shrinks. That's why when you're still operating from perceived trauma, that prefrontal cortex, which is what acts like the spotlight on the awareness of your reality, is shrinking. And over time, your brain gets smaller. Okay. So this is that, like I said, in neuroscience terms, attention acts like a spotlight controlled largely by the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain responsible for planning, decision-making, and self-regulation. When that system is engaged, experience becomes organized, thoughts slow down, sensations become clearer, and choices become visible. Intentional awareness does something fascinating. It collapses noise. So the brain it's constantly receiving far more information than it can process. This is pretty much millions of sensory perceptions every second. And what attention does, what intentional attention does, is filter the fire hose. When intention is deliberate, the brain prioritizes information aligned with your chosen focus. Psychologists sometimes call this the top-down processing, where the mind guides perception instead of being dragged around by it. But for me and for my own mentors, we call it building from the ground up, reestablishing safety and security in the body. Hey, welcome, beautiful. So when you're building it from the ground up, you're attentive through the body. Now, something very beautiful starts to happen when your attention is actively participating through your body. You're aware of your breath instead of running away on a thought train that's taking you somewhere in the future through worry or somewhere from the past in doubt. So this is where you start to anchor through true safety and security in the present. Now, when you do this, you're rekindling a connection that's been lost through the perception of traumatic impact. So when that happens, then the top-down guided attention is laser focused and embodied instead of chaotic and fractalized. And you guys, everyone's focus and attention is chaotic and fractalized until you learn how to intentionally apply and supply your attention. Before I finish this, I want to remind you again, I sent very simple instructions to my group. I repeated those instructions multiple times. I sent screenshots of the emails. I sent backup information to reinforce the simple instructions, and only one person followed the instructions. Everyone else was jumping ahead, adding one assignment in with the other. Not they the response was, but I did click yes on the email. I clicked it multiple times. Just because you said you clicked it multiple times, were you paying attention to the yes actually register? Something very simple as that. And you know what happened? It didn't register. When they went back after I invited them to slow down and pay attention, guess what? All the emails came through. Everything registered. Everything was verified. They were in a rush. They were trying to hurry up. They were worried. They were projecting into the future. They were all over the place. So even that simple action of agreeing and saying yes to a calendar invite was not being followed through with, because they were in a hurry, they were all over the place. There was so many things happening and they had to hurry up and get it done. That urgency is created from the chaos, which is pushing, it's forcing, it's trying to control, and it's not paying attention. So, and I see this across the board in so many areas of life where we just don't slow down. We don't pay attention. So when you're practicing, in practice, what intentional awareness looks like and feels like is you notice your reaction before it becomes behavior. So you don't add more, let's say, toxic habits on top of toxic habits. You're starting to become aware of your habits so that you're not adding more to it before it actually becomes an embedded behavior. And then you've got another behavior to disentangle yourself from. You observe a thought without instantly believing it. You feel an emotion moving through the body rather than being possessed by it. That's a big one. Both of those are. Most people think if they feel sadness that they have to be sad and cry, but that's not true. Sadness, like any acute emotional response, only lasts for 60 to 90 seconds. A thought passing through your awareness, 60 to 90 seconds. Think about that. How much of your life has been ruled by you jumping on the need to follow that thought away from your presence and your embodied self and just chasing it for years and years and years because it was just passing through. You didn't have to latch onto it. You didn't have to believe it, but you did. What about the emotion? How many emotions have been suppressed for fear of feeling them when they were just passing through? How many emotions have been latched onto and compressed and dramatized when they were just passing through? So all of this it's very powerful, you guys. It really, really is. And your nervous system, the point of regulation is it's not to not have an active nervous system, because your nervous system is always active. It's to experience it as still being alive, still being reactive, but you are in the control room. The reactiveness is not controlling you. You are the witness. You are the observer. You are the channel for God's source universe. So therefore, you're aware of all of it. You are the everything, everywhere, all at once. You are the all-knowing self. You can handle it. There's nothing you can't handle. You're fully capable. It's always been the belief and the lie that you can't. That's the difference. So now let's compare it to the other mode. If you're in inattentive chaos through unconscious awareness, and I know that sounds paradoxical, but it describes the default human condition. The brain is always aware of things, but the awareness often runs on autopilot. Habits fire, old emotional predictions activate, and memories influence your interpretation before your conscious thought process actually arrives. So you're acting on old stories in the present moment and then projecting yourself into a phantom future that's based on an old predictive mechanism that is no longer valid right now. So this is where stimulus drives reaction instead of supporting response. So some examples of this are like a tone of voice reminds the nervous system of an old conflict or an old argument. A social media post triggers comparison and jealousy. A stray memory activates a narrative about identity. So the mind then constructs a story explaining the reaction after the fact. And then the person believes that they're thinking clearly, But the thinking is largely a rationalization of emotional momentum already in motion. So chaos doesn't mean madness. It just means unexamined loops, unexamined pattern loops. So when you're in intentional awareness, you interrupt the pattern, you interrupt the loop. So it's not, your brain has evolved to conserve energy, and it's a predictive mechanism. It's trying to be efficient. It's making shortcuts so you don't have to relive the moment because you determined that moment wasn't safe. The point is that you face it in a space of awareness where you're recognizing safety, where you're supported, and you, instead of your physical organism trying to solve yesterday's problem, you face it today. You have an awareness on what it really is, and the problem solves itself. You're not running through life trying to solve the same problem without an awareness of what that actually is. So the small moments of conscious attention, they accumulate like compound interest. When you practice this long enough, you discover that most suffering is not produced by the events themselves. That's why you guys hear me say trauma doesn't happen to you, it happens through you. What's creating the effect is the unquestioned interpretations that have been attached to them. So when you interpret the moment, you're interpreting it through a perception of chaos. This is bad, this is wrong, I don't like this person doesn't like me, they're not choosing me, they're not giving me attention. Or if like a big trauma happens, physical abuse, rape, I've been through those, you are going to perceive the person, the moment, and the event in a very specific way. It has an impact on your nervous system, right? But the most beautiful moment of transformation that started happening for me when I started this path of self-realization was that abuse, that rape didn't really happen to me. Not in this, like I was carrying the story of it. So if I don't want to experience it as happening to me, I've got to let go of the story that it actually has, not diminishing the fact that it took place, but freeing my body from reliving the scenario over and over and over again right now. It's already happened. I don't need to keep reliving it. So when I sit in the realization and I face it and I feel it and I experience it again, but I do so from a place of acceptance and forgiveness as the observer, I realize my ex wasn't the narcissist. Because I was so absorbed in my behaviors and my habits and my addictive behavioral traits, I attracted someone that was able to match and mirror the frequency that I was on. And it was coming from an extreme heightened state of dysregulated chaos. And so I simply just experienced the height of that from rape and abuse and, all kinds of stuff. And that moment of forgiveness was like breathing air into my lungs that I've never breathed before. I've never had that type of breath. It was like, labeling him the narcissist is me not taking responsibility for where I ended up in the first place. So when we meet ourselves in intentional awareness, we begin to emerge from this stance that we've been in our entire lives, which is always expecting something. This comes up in every session that I have. Expectation. And there's different types of expectation. There are healthy expectations. We can live in an expectation that everything is always working out for the best, or we can live in an unconscious expectation that things are always happening to us and there are always bad things happening to us, or bad things will happen to us, or an expectation that I'm never going to be chosen because I was never chosen, an expectation that I'll never be loved because I've never been loved, an expectation that only someone can love me. There's only one person in the world to love me and not myself. That would be coming from someone that believes that their true love is out there somewhere, and they're just walking through life waiting and expecting this invisible thing to show up and finally give them the love that they're seeking. love, just like courage, just like forgiveness, gratitude, it's all an inside job. It doesn't come from the outside. You can't pull anything from out there into here. It doesn't work. Everything out there is just a reflective surface that you're bouncing off of, and it's coming back to you. You're transmitting a Wi-Fi signal, and it's reaching, intercepting, and pulling back into you. Or I'm sorry, it's reaching, intercepting, and reflecting back into you. But if you don't clean up your own broadband signal, if you don't get a clearer signal, you're going to be sending the same trash out over and over and over and over again, and wondering why trash keeps coming back into your field. And that's just because your signal is not clear. So if all of us as humans, our brains are an astonishing pattern recognition machine. This engine is always operating. That's why we can look at different contextual images and think we can see what's there clearly. Like in the image, it looks like there's a chair sitting kind of far off in the distance, and there's a table right here, and it looks like a normal picture with a chair sitting back there. But when the person reaches their hand across the screen, it was it wasn't the size you thought it was, right? It was much smaller, or it was much larger, and it was just the way that your mind and your vision recognizes the pattern through the distance and the way you've always correlated that to be for yourself. It doesn't mean you were seeing it as it really was. And this is how we go through our life. We see the world based on what we believe to be true. And I know you guys have probably heard that a lot, but until you start practicing what that actually is for you, it's just a concept. It's just an idea. It's just information. You don't know what to do with it, though. None of us know what to do with it until we start applying it. I can know all day long that I recognize patterns and still have no effing clue what my actual patterns of recognition are. So these practices are an opportunity for you to reconstruct the architecture of your life. And if you want to be someone that's authentic, that's clear, and that's sovereign, you begin here. And every one of us have relationships in our lives that are still left open, and they haven't completed themselves. And this is because usually we're afraid to communicate, or we think we're communicating our needs, but we're not communicating our needs, we're communicating our wants. Wants and needs are two different things. And we go through life thinking that because we think we know what we want, that's what we're supposed to get. I can want somebody to give me attention all day long. It doesn't mean that I should expect it. Willingness that comes from clear communication and clear and open receptivity. Receptivity is clear. Okay. True receptivity is the ability to receive without projected expectation on anyone or anything. So if let's say I extend an invitation to someone, I am willing to receive whatever comes back, if it comes back, no matter what it is. But to expect that person has to give me something back, to expect that person has to respond, period, to expect that person owes me something through the response, that would be the lie. That would be the illusion. So what I would invite for everyone is to give yourself permission to start just paying attention to how you speak. Pay attention to how you communicate. How aware of you? How aware are you of what you're saying? That's what I want to know. How aware are you of what you're saying? I'm curious, Empress, is that Cherokee? Sorry, this just dawned on me. I was curious who the Empress is. I was curious if that was Cherokee or not. I don't know if you're still here, but if you are, let me know in the chat if that's Cherokee. Or I can't see the picture. I wasn't for sure if I recognized the picture. I can't really see it, and I tried to pull it up and I can't. I can't make it bigger. But I'll say, in coming to a wrap here, that you have an opportunity every single day to rekindle the relationship with yourself. And this is a relationship that isn't running around through life trying so hard to get ahead. And that's the trait that a lot of us live in, is we're trying so hard to get ahead. We're trying so hard to be somewhere else. We're just trying so hard. And I'm just going to invite you guys to start slowing down. Because if you're not giving yourself permission to be present with yourself and with what's actually going on, and again, you're going to think you know what's going on. You're going to think you know what's happening. You're going to think you know. I would recommend, and I will always recommend this, that everyone joins a community or gets a mentor that can assist and support them in being a reflective surface where you can bounce your true self off of and gain a depth of perception around yourself. Because when you're in a space of reflection and it's intentional, it's purposeful, and that person is intentionally giving you yourself back with guidance, with support, with reframes, with honoring you for where you are, but not giving, not letting you cross a boundary line of emotional manipulation where you're called on your emotional manipulation. That's a really powerful place to be. And I cannot tell you how much of me opened up by connecting with mentors that do that for me as well. And I've had, like I said, I've had tons of mentors, but this is the first time where I've had mentors that meet me in a very similar place as I meet myself and I meet my clients. I've always thought that, maybe I was a bit too intense, maybe I was a bit too direct, until I joined a space where I have two people that are equally as attentive, and the intensity isn't a negative intensity. It's an intensity of regulation, of rules, of guidelines, regulated guidelines and boundaries. My nervous system is recognizing how important that structure is to my masculine. My masculine didn't really recognize how much of that structure was missing. And so it's so important to start reconstructing the anatomy and the architecture of your self-awareness so that you can show up daily in your life with clearer habits, a clearer, grounded, anchored awareness, where you're able to recognize who you are. So you're not running around just expecting people to do things for you, or you're sitting there hoping and wishing. People stay so stuck in hope. And hope is a stagnant, dead energy. It's not what you think it is. Hopes keep you just frozen. And again, we're all pretty much fawning and freezing until we start to wake those parts of our body up and start recognizing what's really underneath the fawning and freezing. So if there's anything that you guys take away from this today, I know that you have an opportunity to take away the slowing down and the being more attentive. Pay attention to what you're reading. Pay attention to what you're hearing. Again, if you really want to practice something, you can be with the totality of this session today and be attentive throughout the whole thing. Maybe come back and take notes. Recognize that me coming on here and just speaking for an hour isn't for it's not doing anything for me. I love it. I love coming on here. I love sharing. I love communicating, especially when I used to never use my voice. And now I do, because I know who I am. I know I'm speaking from a space of experience, not just retained information, right? This is me. This is what I live every single day. It's what I share with others. So if you want to practice true attentiveness, be with everything that's here. Pay attention to what's being said and see how you can apply it in your own life. Okay? All right, guys, thank you so much for being here with me today. Thank you so much for receiving everything that I have shared. Again, I appreciate you so much. I do not take it for granted that for anyone that shows up. And you know, I am in a place right now where I'm just so in love with sharing what I've learned that it feels so good to have released any expectations around what that has to look like for other people. You know, whether you take it or whether you don't, it's up to you. But I can tell you right now that if you choose to receive it, even just one or two things, it's going to support you. I promise. And if anyone is interested in joining my free community, it's available year round. It's like it's free. So you can come in, you can be a part of that space. I also have a school community. The school community is where our free community interacts as well. It's on WhatsApp and it also is on school. The donation based part of the community is also now open and available. It's a month to month donation based investment, and you receive two 90-minute sessions from me every month. And these are somatic practices with we exchange mirrored reflections in the Zoom call. I reflect for those whatever someone's going through, they will share in the Zoom call. I will reflect back, answer questions. We will have guided somatic practices, and that's for at least 90 minutes. It might go a little bit over that, and those are recorded. So two 90-minute sessions every month. You have the school classroom. For that, I also post assignments, and the assignments are to help you in exploring the relationship with yourself. Those assignments, can take like a few hours to complete. So I give everyone a week to complete it. And my niche is the self-development, focusing on self-development through neurotransformation, applying neurotransformation and trauma therapy through somatics and embodied practices. So daily habitual action to transform the inner belief systems and meaning assignment, to allow everyone to operate from a more clear, open, and available space. So everything that I do is focused on trauma resolution, somatic embodiment. It's complex, but it's also simple. It sounds complex, but the complexity might just be in what it sounds like. The way that it's applied in the practices actually bring us back to the simplicity of our own life that maybe that's been overlooked. Like what I was speaking into today was around just attentive awareness, paying attention to yourself, paying attention to your habits, paying attention to how you communicate with others, and having an opportunity to realize how much of what we say is so unconscious that we don't even realize that it's coming from a state of dysregulated chaos. So everything that I offer, and I walk with people side by side. I walk with everyone every step of the way. Anyone that works with me, whether you're in the free space or you're in the donation-based space or you're in my mentorships are 6 months to a year. You have my full undivided, not undivided, but you have my attention. I'm available every single day. People reach out, they have any questions or they want guidance or support. I'm always there supporting. I've only found that type of mentorship in one other space. And because now I keep the amount of people that join to a minimum so that it remains intimate. So I don't allow over I right now I'm not allowing more than 15 people into the space because I want it to remain intimate. I offer things on the internet, like I go live here and speak into things. I do have paid courses. I have a free space that people are welcome to join. It's on WhatsApp. And I just opened a school community. So I post things between there and I connect with people through there. I also do Zoom lives I'll do one Zoom live for them for the free space a month. I'm probably going to maybe up that a little bit, but anything that I bring through on here, obviously free, it's available for that. But for my donation based space, I offer 2 somatic sessions a month at the beginning of the month and the end of the month. Plus, they have weekly assignments, at least 2 to 3 weeks out of the month. There's an assignment, a self exploration. And I also support everyone in mirrored reflections 2 days a week. So there's, like the first week, there's the Zoom call where we do a somatic practice and I guide everyone through recognizing things in their body and we connect there. And since it's donation based, that's why it's set up that way. I'm not asking people to pay a specific amount. You pay for the month based on what you feel it's worth to you. So we actually have our first session for the month coming up on Friday. The first assignment for the week is due tomorrow. And I also reflect, I come in and privately connect with everyone in that space 2 days a week. So it's a pretty in-depth connection that I offer for everyone in the donation-based space. Now my mentorships are definitely paid. That's a pretty, I have three different options for my mentorship space. And you can do a month with me to try it out. After that, you have to do no less than 3 months, 6 months, and a year, just because it's about building consistency and practicing responsible action. So everything that I do is intentional because of I've been applying this for many years now, and I'm just applying what actually works and passing that on to everyone. So if anyone's interested, I will have all the information in the description on how you can contact me. If nothing else, drop into the free space, see what you think about it. And just, I'm always sharing in there, and you can receive whatever you would like. Don't receive whatever you like. It's up to you. Just join the WhatsApp group and you can be in there communicating. And then if you like that and you want to jump into the donation-based space to give that a try, you can. It's up to you. So it's and when it comes to things like that, it's a good opportunity. Well, one thing that we do in my time with everyone is we work on the completion of the relationship with our parents. And with the perception, even just the perception that parents are narcissists, if you choose to go back, and I would invite you, if you're interested, to listen to this session from the beginning, because there's a lot of things I'm speaking into that are addressing such topics like that. And understanding the relationship with our parents is the relationship that we carry through our entire life. And the relationship we have with our parents is the relationship we have with everyone else. And until that relationship is complete, until it can exist peacefully through us, doesn't matter what they've done. It doesn't matter how they act. It matters how I choose to perceive the action. That's what generates through me. So just like I mentioned a moment ago about my ex, I used to believe my ex was narcissist because he was abusive. I've gone through the rape. He's raped me. I've had all of those experiences. Without going too deep into the stories, I've experienced them, and I was labeling them in a very specific way. And that label, that story, it's not always factual. Actually, no story that's held in trauma is factual. It's fractaled. And that fractalization creates a major imbalance in our nervous system, which means we're always operating through fight or flight, right? We're always hyper vigilant, looking for something bad to happen, expecting something bad to happen. And even if we think we're not, we have to remember again how much of our subconscious is operating, 85, 88% of the time. We don't even know everything that's passing through our subconscious awareness, because it's just generating. It's running on autopilot. So I will have everything in the description for anyone that's interested in joining. What I will say in closing here is, if you do choose to join, remember that this space is a contained space. There are rules, there are guidelines, there are boundaries. This honors everyone in the space and keeps the space safe and secure. It honors everyone's time and energy because it is a free space. Those are the rules, the guidelines, the boundaries are layered a bit more in the space that's paid. But the free space, there are guidelines and rules there. And I just letting people know, if the rules are not followed, I do kick people out of the group. It's not anything personal. It's just, again, can people follow guidelines? Can you give it your attention without trying to control what's happening there to suit your needs? And instead recognize what your needs actually are instead of just coming in and trying to do what you want. So we're all in this together. It's not an attempt to control anybody. It's an opportunity to relinquish control and explore yourself in honesty, transparency, and truth. Um, so, and with that being said, it's an opportunity for there to be, this happens in many, my parents growing up were not emotionally available. That was the story anyways. So what the greatest gift you get to give yourself is you understand your feelings, because you're the only one that's responsible for your feelings to begin with. And that this is again just tying back into the completion of the relationship with our parents means that we no longer choose to see them in a way where we're blaming them or identifying with them in a way where we think that they're responsible for us. And this was a question that was posed to me from my mentors is, are our parents inherently responsible for us? No. But they can willfully choose to be in different levels of responsible caregiving and responsible action. In truth, in real truth, nobody is inherently responsible for us. What's actually inherited through us and our family and our bloodlines is a lack of responsibility. So when we step up and we take responsibility, then we become the ones that are responsible for ourselves. Therefore, we can start having conversations without expectation. And that's when communication starts to clarify itself. So even if something like that does happen, give yourself permission to pay attention to how you label and assign meaning in what story you're telling yourself, because again, no one is inherently responsible for us or our feelings. And when we start stepping in and taking responsibility, we start to see how much of our power we're reclaiming for ourselves and how much of that power we've been putting out on others as an expectation for how we think they should show it for us. But of course, nobody tells us this growing up, right? Nobody tells us we have this option. And that's why I share things like this and other people share things like this, because it is an opportunity to start regaining the control that maybe we feel like we've never had, or we feel like maybe other people have been controlling us. And even though it can seem that way, when we're in those stories, it doesn't necessarily mean that's the whole truth. And those types of stories, they don't give us the whole truth. They're biased for a reason. They're biased. It's a form of protective mechanism, trying to protect ourselves, right? Trying to make it feel like we're safe from harm, when in truth, that story harms us more than anyone ever could, because technically nobody can actually harm us, just like no one is inherently actually responsible for us. And I understand that what I'm saying to everyone and anyone, until this becomes a habit, what I'm saying it's really going to just start as an idea or a concept. But when you put it to practice, you daily recognize where you want to attach a story or a meaning onto someone else. Most importantly, your parents. It has to start with your parents. I have walked around my entire life believing that my dad forgot about me, that he was never fully, me and my dad have a great relationship, but I've always carried, for the longest time before we had the great relationship, I used to believe that he wasn't emotionally available. I chose to believe that my mom was a narcissist and that she was always selfish and never really loved me or cared for me in the way that I thought she should. But the key to that was not that she never loved me. It was never that my dad wasn't emotionally available. It was that was the story I chose to tell myself. And when I stand behind that story, I can't see them differently, because my story is saying, we believe that they're at fault. We believe that they were never there. We believe that they never listen. Like we, meaning me, myself, and I, we believe that they never listen to us. They always interrupt. They never care about what I have to say. They don't care about what I'm feeling. They always talk over me. Now, do they always talk over me? No. But that ties in really easily to the story. When I want them to be the villain and I want them to be the bad guy, then I will overly dramatize the facts. The facts are maybe a handful of times when I've been talking, they've talked over me. Is it because they don't want to listen or they're not emotionally available? No, they just didn't hear me. They just didn't hear me. They didn't actually know I was talking. So do you see how the story can be very convoluted? And even if they were listening, even if they did hear me and they talked over me, does that mean necessarily that they don't care? No. It just simply means that they wanted to be a part of the conversation in the only way that they knew how. And that's how they communicated. They can only communicate from their own belief systems. And if nobody's ever taught them any different, then they don't know any different. So this is where we have an opportunity to regain control. And if we heal the relationship or complete the relationship with our parents, we're not walking around projecting these type of expectations. So, hang on, I gotta block some of these people. Hang on one second. And and I understand what you're saying. I really do. I'm not disagreeing that things like that happen. Okay, Panda. What I'm offering you here is an opportunity to not consistently choose to stand behind that story, to place them in a position of being responsible for everything that's happening. Because at some point in your life, you're going to have to take responsibility. Well, you don't have to. At any given point in your life, you get to take responsibility for yourself. And true responsibility for yourself means that you don't consistently revert back to what they're doing, how they're acting, what they're doing being wrong, because it's easy to place that on them. I'm not saying things like that don't happen. What I am saying is that what you want to consistently focus on, or do you want to experience a level of responsibility that allows you to not have to be consistently living from that state of perceived trauma? I've been beaten, I've been raped, but I don't blame that person. I don't blame them at all, because they're not at fault. It's not their fault. They're not responsible for me. I'm responsible for me. So therefore, I always have a choice. You always have a choice. We always have a choice through willful action. I can willingly choose to not only forgive myself, but forgive anyone in my life at that time that might have been acting alongside me from my own belief system. So my own belief system is just mirroring people back to me. If I think my parents are at fault, then I'm only going to see what's happening through other parents in my life, in the region. I'm only going to see them as being at fault, like parents in India. If I believe parents in India are not emotionally available, if I believe that they're physically abusive, if I believe that, then that's all I'm going to see. It doesn't mean factually that those events don't happen. It means that that's all I'm focusing on. That's all I'm giving my attention to. Therefore, my nervous system is dedicated to consistently seeing the fault in those people, instead of reclaiming responsibility and choosing to see that I don't have to be focused on that, and I don't have to give my power away by consistently going into that story and expecting something different to happen. So I've worked with plenty of people, and I've worked with plenty of people that live in many different cultures, many different countries with many different backgrounds. And everyone's got similar experiences, more so than you think, from multiple countries. And it doesn't, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. And that's not me being disingenuous or I'm not not I'm just aware of what's really going on underneath the surface, and there is a difference in that. So I'm just gonna leave that here, and everything that I've shared here is able to support everyone if you give yourself permission to allow it. What's most important is that if you're not willing to allow a different perception or a different belief, you'll remain stuck and captive to the belief that you're in right now, and you'll never be able to see the world differently. You see the world through your beliefs. And if the only belief you're willing to be committed to is a belief of wrongdoing, then throughout your life, you'll always, always find that someone is doing something wrong. And it will always be them doing something wrong to you, because from the very beginning, that wrongdoing was projected onto your parents. And it doesn't have to be that way. It really doesn't. So it's a choice. It's an option. And anyone can choose to free themselves and liberate themselves without carrying around that emotional baggage. You don't have to. And I cannot tell you how freeing it is to no longer be blaming the world for whatever you think is happening to you. And it doesn't matter. Whatever's happening to other people, it's not your concern. Don't take that on. Choose where you're going to focus your thoughts, energy, and attention, and your thoughts are what you choose to focus on. Whatever, again, just going back to what I said at the very beginning there, towards the beginning, emotions and thoughts only last for 60 to 90 seconds. So if you're choosing, as something is passing through your awareness, what you're going to latch onto. Are you going to latch on to the negative? Or are you going to latch on to the positive? Are you going to chase? But again, you also want to be aware, you don't want to chase the feel good. You want to be willing to feel everything. You want to be willing to feel grief, sadness, anger, aggression, resentment without needing to go into it to prove yourself. Sadness passes through me. It doesn't mean I have to be sad. Anger passes through me. Doesn't mean I have to be angry. Thoughts of resentment pass through me. Doesn't mean I have to project that onto someone. It doesn't mean I have to put that out there. It means I can just let it pass through and be aware of it. That's the observer. So observe your thoughts, observe your reality. That's your reality, where your attention goes to the most. You can experience a different reality at any given moment. You just have to shift the focal point of that flashlight, that prefrontal cortex, focus differently. Okay. That's not going to solve everything, but that's one ingredient to baking the cake of self-development. Okay. All right, you guys, thank you for tuning in today. Thank you again for being here with me. I truly appreciate the interaction. So thank you for dropping into the chat and communicating and sharing your experience with life. I truly appreciate you being open and honest and giving yourself permission to come forward. So again, if anyone would like to work with me, I will have the information in the description. I do have a handful of available spots in my group space, but once those are full, there will be no availability until someone leaves. So if you're interested in joining, again, you can reach out and connect with me. And of course, if you're interested in more in-depth, more dedicated commitment, that the mentorship, the actual investment towards the mentorship would be for you. And that's something where I always tell people, you don't want to go into it asking yourself, like, how am I going to do this? How am I going to afford this? It's like I always do with anything I pay for and invest in, even when it's thousands of dollars. What would I lose if I didn't? What part of me would be consistently repeating itself through life, and I would miss out on things if I didn't commit myself to something different? And it's always a choice, right? It's always a choice. All right, you guys, thank you for being here. This is Éoaccí. I appreciate you. I love you, and I hope to see you next time. Until then, Adonai.